Welcome to the September 11th Revere City Council meeting. Could we please stand and salute the flag? Thank you.
Roll call of the members. Councilor Cogliandro.
Here.
Here. Councilor Morabito is absent. Councilor Novoselsky is absent. Councilor Powers is absent. Councilor Rizzo is absent. Councilor Sereno.
Here.
Here. Councilor Silvestri.
Here.
Here. Councilor Visconti.
Here.
Here. Councilor Zambuto.
Here.
Here. And President Pro Tem McKenna.
Here.
Here. Quorum is present. First matter on the agenda, Brian Dakin of Left Field will conduct a presentation on the new schematic design for the Revere High School project.
Please state your name and address.
It's good. Brian Dakin, 1 High Street. I'm here tonight to bring the City Council up on some progress that's gone through the last number of building committee meetings. We have a handful of slides to go through, not many. No decisions, no votes. It's all just update at this point. And I figure I'll try to fly through most of these slides. Feel free to interrupt me, but there'll definitely be some time for some questions at the end of it. Ashley, when you get a second, next slide. Thank you. So as of last Thursday night, the school building committee narrowed down the current preferred schematic report. That's the name of the phase we're in, to the final 3 options that we're going to carry into pricing exercises over the next month or 2. There's going to be comparative cost estimates performed of 3 of the options that we're going to go through tonight. And just sort of as a reminder, there's a note on the right of the slide that, per MSBA protocol, how the MSBA system works, there's going to be, we'll do pricing, updated pricing for just a code upgrade of the building and for an addition renovation. And just quickly, the code upgrade is purely that. Same building, strip it down to structure, build it back. Doesn't necessarily address any of the programmatic deficiencies of that building. Science labs or support for other programs. And it's one of the reasons the building committee has always gravitated away from it. And the addition renovation option was really a schedule and sort of site killer. It would basically be in the dead center of the site, hard to phase, long schedule, et cetera. So just as a reminder, there's really 3 options that are being looked at, but in the coming months, as we complete the pricing exercise, it'll look like there's 5. And any of them could be on the table, but the 3 that are on the screen without an X through them, that was the last scheme, which was a 6-story scheme that was eliminated this last Thursday for various reasons, namely just takes up too much of the site. I'd like to walk through the 3 versions we have, but before we go through item by item, you'll see that we have a 4, a 5, and a 6-story here. And a lot of the differences between these schemes really break down to the height. And generally speaking, the taller a building, the less of the site it's going to take up, but these all use the site in a different way. The other thing that I think is worth noting for everyone is, as you might know, companies like Left Field do a lot of work in the MSBA system. We do a number of high schools. 4 has really become, by far, the most common configuration of a high school. Smaller high schools maybe have the luxury of going down to 2 or 3, but anything of this size, carrying this amount of students, 2,400, 2,500 students, is typically a 4. 4 is not a high-rise building. We know how they work. There's a lot of examples out there. We have a lot of examples from other communities. The taller you go, granted, it takes up a little bit less of the site footprint, but those buildings are a little less tested, at least in Massachusetts, outside of places like Boston or places like New York City that are really urban. The higher you go, it's a little bit different. Delivering education in the building, getting place to place is a little different in the building. So I'll highlight some of those factors going forward, but what I wanted to note while this slide is up there is 4 is pretty much what every high school project looks at. Very few go higher than that. And there's really very few 6s that we know of in the state. There's a couple, some of which have separate programs like Voctech on their own floor, et cetera. But I just wanted to sort of introduce that before we go into them. So I'm going to run through these schemes quick, and we can come back to any of these slides. And 2 slides down, please, Ashley. The first one is called the courtyard scheme, and what I wanted to start with here is sort of a really basic visual map to how this site needs to be phased. All of these three remaining options would pretty much be the same experience from a construction point of view. The phasing will be the same for all of them. And it would start with what's in the big red dashed line, effectively the baseball diamond and the soccer field that are out there. Best case scenario, spring 2025, those fields are taken offline. The fence is built around them, and that fence pretty much won't go away until the summer of 2028, which would be the period when that building's done, and we're able to spend that summer between the two school years in 2028 moving in furniture, technology, teachers, et cetera, have them ready to go for beginning of the school year in late 2028. So that's always going to be phase one. The area in blue is sort of what we're calling a phase 1A. That's an area that's always going to have to be active. We can never take away the parking, access, circulation to keep that building going. So how we're envisioning this is the last 2 summers of construction, summer 2026, summer 2027, before we're looking to move in. We'd probably do what we call summer slammers out there. We'd have to shut down the whole site, and we'd have to get the work done in the parking lot and the access roads that we'd need while neither building is in session. Nobody's working in the new building, and nobody's working in the old building. There theoretically still would be access off School Street, but most often when we take away these roads, even from an emergency access perspective, we really got to shut these buildings down. So we'd look to pick away at that, the area between RMA all the way out to School Street during the final 2 summers, open the building up in the summer of 2028. Once students and staff are in the new building, in that parking lot in the blue area, all that's back online. We would then put a fence around the existing building, more or less where you see the yellow line, and that would become a construction site, first a abatement and demolition site, and then a field construction site from summer 2028 through the calendar end of 2029. So we'd look to get those fields pretty much done by winter. That probably means coming back in the spring and making sure all the grass took and all that. I know it's not ideal timing for opening up parks, potentially in December 2029, but that would be the amount of time that we think we'd need to get that building down, get all the utility work done in there, get the fields built. So this phasing applies to all the options you're going to see tonight. This slide won't continue to reoccur. I just wanted to run through it once, and at the end we'll finish on this slide because I think that's most applicable to the council's next few agenda items. So next slide, please. This is the site plan for the 4-story option, which we're calling the courtyard. It's a little bit self-evident based on looking at the layout of the building. You see where the number 5 is. It's a large interior courtyard that's basically flanked by 4 stories of academic space. The heart of the school, athletic and music and arts programs, are more or less on the left. This has multiple entry points. The main entry point would be more or less from the parking lot on that northwest side of the building. A securable entry into the courtyard, which does have program space designed for outdoor classrooms, et cetera, in the middle of the building, and limited space down on the south side of the building, but that's where we're looking most likely to have the bus drop. There's a lot of arrows on this that indicate traffic flow. Traffic is absolutely going to be something that is front and center and will remain to be front and center more or less through the end of next year, all the way through the schematic into the design development phase. We'll continue meeting with parties from the city and having the professionals analyze traffic. More or less, we're looking to keep the traffic patterns pretty much the same. We're really hesitant, and the city's hesitant, the school's hesitant to create any major cut through here. We don't want to do that. So we're looking into devising bus lanes, keeping buses separate from people, having buses drop off on the correct side, of the building, et cetera. So as you see these diagrams, those blue arrows, yellow arrows indicate vehicular traffic, bus traffic, et cetera. And as you can see, the fields in their restored state over on the left include the 2 fields that currently are part of Agricola Park, 5 tennis courts, which support a tennis program, and the ability to have matches there, tournaments there, and some distributed parking out, which sort of where the entrance to the high school is right now, just above those tennis courts. Next slide, please. we're going to show you a site plan and then a basic massing 3D elevation of just the building for each of these options here. This really is where you can see that main entry coming on the left of the building, bus drop entry on the bottom of the page. You can see that courtyard in the middle flanked by the 4-story academic building. All those spaces on the left are health, wellness, sports, music, technology, et cetera. All of which is connected by sort of a heart of the school in the dead center, which would be a large atrium space. Next slide, please. And I think you can go 2 down. This next story is the tallest, the triangle scheme, we're calling it. You can see it has a slightly smaller footprint. That was the idea of looking at some of these taller schemes. From a site work perspective, pretty much the same. Fields end up in the same spot, parking and circulation in the same spots. The real differences are how the building's laid out. So on both of these triangle schemes, the main academic wing is out on American Legion Highway. So that bar of the building in this scheme is a 6-story bar that has a sort of connector, not quite a bridge, that'll go all the way up the height of the building to connect back into the heart of the school, other academic spaces, other program spaces, sports, music, arts, et cetera. What was in the courtyard as far as that exterior program space for outdoor classrooms is more or less on the south side of the building in these schemes. So down where you see those number 5 on the south side, down towards East Mountain is more or less where a lot of that outdoor program would have to be. When the building's a little bit taller and a little bit skinnier, that's more or less where we were able to get some of that outdoor space, as well as outdoor space, program space between the RMA and the building. Next slide, please. This is a 3D view sort of showing that 6-story bar out on the highway and its connection back into the building. You'll notice there are some smaller light wells. These are less so courtyard space that are intended for classrooms and use and more getting light down into the 5-story portion of the academic wing, which is on the south here, the bottom of the page. And all those other parts and pieces, performing arts, sports, health and wellness, heart of the school, are middle and left of the page. So you can start seeing where in the 6-story scheme, the 6-story piece is really only out on the highway, 5-story at the south side of the building, and then it drops to various heights as we get into the heart of the school. 2 slides down, please. This is a variation of the triangle scheme that takes away the 6th floor of the academic wing. You can see that bar out on American Legion Highway looks a little bit wider, taller rather, on the screen here. We more or less, the architect has studied taking that 6th floor and distributing it to the southeast side of the site, bottom right. So you'll see that that building gets a little bit closer to the property line there, but more or less same design. 5-story academic bar out on the highway, 5-story academic bar towards East Mountain, and then all of the other support spaces up in the middle of the plan right there. Again, same site circulation for the most part, same fields layout, same phasing as the other plans. Next slide, please. This is the last sort of 3-story view, very similar to the one you just saw. It's really that piece out on the highway is 5, not 6 stories. So it'd be 2 5-story structures holding most of the academics, not all the academics. There's academics throughout this building, but you can see that that's a bit wider on the scheme before. That 5-story piece out on the highway is a little bit skinnier. So the next slide is just a repeat of the phasing slide. I figured that was sort of the right thing to have on the screen. I know this discussion wants to go towards fields use, but I'll pause here and see if anybody has any questions related to the project or building. One thing I'll say before then is, as I started this with, we're going to be spending the next month, 2 months, working on cost estimates to compare all these options. Each of them will get its own schedule, its own phasing. We anticipate the schedules are going to be pretty much the same. These are really just a different shape of building. They're very similar projects. So I don't really envision that the schedules are going to change much option to option, but the dollars could. And generally speaking, we then will probably have all that stuff assembled into sort of a final big presentation with designs, floor plans, some more views of what's going on here with costs, with schedules. And we anticipate December into January really spending some time with that information out there with the council, out there in the public. Have a number of meetings where we're just looking for Q&A and input and drive this towards a selection of the preferred option, potentially December, potentially January. The key is that we just don't want to really land the plane like we landed the plane last time and come in with costs and ask people to make a decision within a meeting, 2 meetings. So we're really trying to have some time in December, late November, into December and into January to have the info out there, have you folks able to absorb it. We'll come to meetings, go through questions, et cetera. So high level, that's the project schedule. That preferred option next spring into summer would then go through a schematic design. That would set up theoretically sort of a final approval of project, debt authorization out in the July, August of next year area. So we'd be back to the point of complete with schematic design next summer. And then after that, looking to move on to design development, bid packages, and getting a project going.
Great, thank you. Councilor Silvestri?
Thank you, Madam President. And Mr. Dagan, thank you for being here tonight. Just a question. Does the baseball field abut School Street? Is like the third baseline right on School Street there?
The third baseline is on School Street. I think that's probably about, if you were talking the baseline itself to the sidewalk, I think we're probably talking 70, 80 feet.
Okay.
So it's on it, but it's not right on it, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
Yep.
And then the homes that abut on East Mountain Ave, that abut the fields and the building, how far of a distance between the building and the homes will there be?
Right now, I think it's important to note there's no structures out there. So it's most likely that on the backside of those properties, on the school property, there's probably going to have to be a retaining wall that varies in height. So if you're down on those fields, there's going to be points in some of those houses. If you were looking up at the houses, you'd be looking at somewhere between a 6 and 12 foot in areas retaining wall to hold up all those yards behind there. But there are some pretty close points. The bottom left on this screen of the soccer field, that regulation soccer field really just fits in there. So there's appropriate runouts from the back of the field, but I think at some points it's 10, 15 feet from that retaining wall.
Thank you, Mr. Dagan.
You're
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Cogliandro?
Thank you, Madam President. Brian, thank you so much for being here tonight. Do all of these design options include the admin buildings within the design?
So, good question, actually. In the main building, no. The admin office, there's really no good place to put that inside those sort of 3D views you just saw. We are going to treat that as sort of a pricing alternate for now. It, in theory, would be a separate price that we'll present that would be to put a building up out in the parking lot. The existing parking lot, which becomes the final parking lot, a standalone little building. And we're going to carry that separately. Makes it a little bit easier if there's a decision by the school and the city that goes elsewhere to get rid of it. But other than putting it up into the building somewhere, 4 stories, 5 stories up, there's really just nowhere good to put it inside the new building.
And just to, thank you, and just to be, I believe you mentioned this before, but we don't receive MSBA reimbursement for that building.
Correct. 0. Yep.
Okay. I believe this was said in the last building committee meeting, but the building upgrade option where you take the current building down, that is only being done because it's a mandatory part of submitting it to MSBA. Is that correct?
Yeah, at the final point of this phase, preferred schematic report, the MSBA regulations say you can have however many options you really like, but the team has to tell you what would bring the code up to be, and you have to entertain at least one addition renovation. So those have been out there. They never got any traction for various reasons, but those sort of have to stay on in the final judgment of which of these 5 options does the school and city want to proceed with.
Thank you. One more question and one more comment, if I may. Thank you for the leeway. One of my main concerns has always been affordability. In your opinion, I know you haven't gone to the pricing stage, but which one of these projects is the cheapest? 4, 5, or 6 stories?
It's an interesting question, and that's something that we're looking to give you a definitive answer on well before anyone has to make this decision. But there's really 3 drivers of cost when you're talking about a building this big. The first is square footage. So other than that district admin, that's the only sort of square footage that's in flux. Otherwise, the building is the building. Second driver is the building envelope. Typically a tighter building envelope, less geometry on the outside of the building, less roof, et cetera, will be a little bit more cost efficient. However, the third driver is mechanical systems, and a 4-story building, even with a garage below it, is not going to be a high-rise. A 5 probably will be, a 6 will be. So even as the building gets taller and maybe the envelope gets a little more cost efficient, the second it's defined as a high-rise, there's going to be a lot of mechanical systems that have to come in, pressurizing stairwells, et cetera, all sorts of details that would drive the mechanical costs up. So I think they're all going to be pretty similar, to be honest with you.
Thank you. And sorry, instead of a comment, I do have a question. Which one of these, I think I already know the answer, but would a 6-story building allow for more space around the building itself?
It would. I think a lot of that depends on the view you take on this school, and all of these high schools really try to capture some of that as usable academic space, whether it's to support the tech program, classes, science programs, performance area. So the courtyard scheme more or less encapsulates that program inside the building, inside the donut, so to speak. As the building gets a little bit smaller footprint on the other options, some of the program sort of spills out onto the outside of the building. So yes, there's more space out there, but it's meant to be active, engaged space by students, and it's meant to be used. So I think there's multiple views on which one of those is better. It's not my job to pick which one's better. We just try to make sure people understand that, the courtyard scheme sort of encapsulates school program in the courtyard. The other schemes, yes, there's more space, the building's further back, but there's probably going to be program space out there that's going to be, hopefully going to be used and embraced.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Novoselsky?
Thank you, Madam President. Brian, thank you for coming up again.
You're welcome.
I know it's not easy for any of us, but I have three points I want to try and look at. First of all, I know the map's not up there anymore, but between the high school and the tennis court, there's a little rectangular area. What was right there?
That little gray area?
Right, just below the gray area, the little rectangle.
The blue rectangles are tennis courts.
No, to the right of that, to the right of the
Oh, okay. So really
it's not the tennis court, it's the soccer field.
to the right of the soccer field.
Yeah.
So that's basically what we're saying there with the blue line is that we're going to have to make whatever vehicular connection for the front drop-off and the connection to Cary Avenue in one of the summers. So there'll be some point going into early 2028 when the new building exists, the old building exists, and we've got to do some amount of work in the summer. There's no building out there. That's all. It's all sidewalk circulation, depending on the scheme, trying to get that front drop-off built. So when the new school opens in the summer into fall of 2028, that connection from School Street all the way out to Cary Ave is in place. So there's no buildings in between there. That's all different flavors of vehicular access and pedestrian access. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, clarifies it some. The other thing is regarding the baseball diamond and the field and the tennis courts, where do people park to go into these and visit and
Yep.
enjoy the sports?
Really, the answer to that is pretty much where they park now. That upper part of the building, where the lot is now, if you go down there, will mostly be intact. There'll be a little bit of parking between the fields, but it's more or less the same place they park now. And
Not as large.
It's not as large
You got
and-
300-400 spaces in the lot now, and you'll be lucky to have 50 when you're through.
correct, I'll have to look up the counts. Where all of these buildings, all these options, by the way, have parking under the building. I know that doesn't really help the fields question,
Right.
Counselor, but we're trying to make up whatever surface parking we lose under the building. So kind of in the same spot, but you're right, in the end, there's less surface parking.
A lot less.
Mm-hmm.
The last issue is, and relating to Councilor Silvestri's and the baseball diamond. I'm concerned about the size of the field. Now, there are certain sizes, I know when we did the Curtis Park, we went from a sidelines from 310 feet, if not a little more, down to 300 feet, down the right field, down the left field line, and a little more than that on the right field line. And center field is good, that's a good distance, but it's still not varsity baseball area. What I'm looking for is the size of the ball field, down right field, left field, center field. And also considering we're so close to homes, that the fencing around about the batting cage and everywhere, that'd be extra high. And I had to do that down the Garfield because the houses were getting croaked by foul balls. And it seems to work. But, it's something we have to look at and make sure that fencing is a little higher than normal.
Absolutely, and I'm a little bit ashamed as a baseball fan that I don't know the distances. I will look up what that design shows for left field, right field, center field for the outer fence distance. But we definitely will be talking about high sports netting, especially as we crunch all these numbers. That's one of those items we have to quantify. How big is it? How tall is it? But I would expect to need significant netting on both the first and third base lines there.
To make sure the size is that of varsity baseball.
Yep.
Not
I'll check
junior
that.
varsity, not little league, varsity baseball, good distance hitting, where they would have to really poke it to get a home run.
Yep, agreed.
Thank you.
Any other councilors? Permission to speak from the chair, please?
Sure.
Back in the day, we had Hill Park, and we had a high fence netting. Hill Park abutted the houses, so we never had any problems with that high fence netting. So just to keep that in mind. Thank you. I think that's it. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Next item on the agenda, Dr. Kelly and Dr. Galucci will appear before the City Council to address plans for the high school athletic programs during the development of the new Revere High School.
State your name and address, please.
Hi, everyone. Richie Galucci, 38 Ledgewood Drive, Danvers, Mass. It's nice to see you all. Thank you for having me. So Councilor Silvestri in his motion posed specific questions that I'm here to answer, and of course, any follow-up questions that you may have. So the first question asked whether or not athletes at the Revere High School would have to be bused to practices and games. I think I can say definitively that the answer to that would be yes. In talking to Mr. Shea and Mr. Hinojosa, we're struggling for field space as it is. Specifically, I can tell you that the football team very rarely has 100 yards to practice on because they split Harry Delarusso with the field hockey team. Boys and girls soccer practice JV and varsity together to not have to have 4 separate practices, and freshmen also on the boys soccer side. So I would say that if these fields were taken away, and to speak to what Councilor Novoselsky just said, we do not have another varsity baseball field. So that would be years of away games for our varsity baseball athletes. Councilor Silvestri also asked the cost. The cost when we have to hire a bus service per our contract is $635 per bus. Next year, it goes up to $660. After that year, the contract expires, and then it goes out to bid. We would anticipate that that would go higher than $660, but no definitive information on that 2 years from now. Also asked about the impact on kids. So definitely, certainly, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year are years you never get back in your life. And so just trying to put myself back in 1992 to 1996, Richie Galucci, who played 3 sports at Revere High School, to not have any home games. I mean, that's an impact in itself. It would also prevent kids from the Rumney Marsh Academy and Revere High School from having PE classes outside, which we do on a regular basis in the fall and the spring, especially in the high school because the gym can get very crowded. And so if multiple classes go outside and there's a class or two that stays inside, it's certainly more optimal space for our kids and teachers. Sorry, I'm just making sure I answer all the questions. Councilor Silvestri asked if temporary fields need to be built. I believe we are at the mercy of the state on that. If the state tells us we have to have temporary fields up when we break ground, then the answer to that question would be yes. We would have to find land in the city to build temporary fields. Where that is, I do not know at this time, but we would. And just in terms of years and following Mr. Dakin's presentation, it looks as though the fields would not be ready until the winter of '29. So we're looking probably, if we break ground on the new high school in '25, we're looking at about 4+ years of no fields for our kids out back. And I think that was all the questions in the motion.
Any councilors? Councilor Silvestri?
Thank you, Madam President. Dr. Galucci, thank you very much. These were the most important things that I've been thinking of since we've decided to move the school back to the existing site. So you have confirmed we will be busing students outside of the city for practices and games. We don't have adequate fields because we are taking them away. We will not have phys ed classes outside in the Rumney Marsh or the high school for approximately 5 years. All to fit a 20-pound rock into a 5-gallon bucket. I just don't understand why we're doing this, but it's not my call. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other councilors? Councilor Novoselsky?
Thank you, Madam President. Doctor, you talk about busing. Now, we talk about Healy busing, or are we talking about in-house busing?
So it would be in-house if we had those buses available. I think our transportation is stretched very thin. We've had different conversations about that. But if we were to have to hire Healy to bus our athletic teams to practices, whereas right now, we really only hire Healy. We use our in-house busing to take our athletes to games, but now we'd be forced with away games for teams that don't utilize those fields and day-to-day practices for all teams. I don't have definitive numbers, but I would say that it's pretty likely that we would have to contract out for some bus transportation if that was our burden to bear, not only games, but also practices on a daily basis. And especially if it was far enough away from the school.
Yeah, you would think it would be a lot cheaper to do in-house without
Sure.
no drivers.
And we always start with that.
Yeah.
We always start with that. But even with that right now, today, with the fields back there, that is stretched thin. But certainly we never go out to contract before we utilize our in-house. We utilize in-house first and then go to contract if we need to.
Okay, now, as far as Ambrose Park, during all this construction, we don't have use of that?
I believe we do have use of that, at least until 6 p.m. Because the high school athletics have rights to those
So
fields.
that could be used for PE
Sure. Yep.
in some sense.
Yep.
And now, as far as varsity baseball,
Mm-hmm.
is the SBA field large enough for that?
I do not believe it is. I asked our athletic director if we have any regulation varsity fields other than Revere High School. The only one that was named was Garfield, but right, and he said the same thing, like, that's not regulation.
No, definitely
Right,
not. But I would
right.
think that SBA field is so large, could be used for varsity baseball.
Could be. I could look
There's no
into that,
fence-
yeah.
There's no fence in the outfield, but it would be open.
Right.
Like the old Garfield used to be. So, something to look at.
Yep,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Cogliandro?
Thank you, Madam President. Dr. Galucci, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I don't know if this would be a question for you. I know you haven't been here that long. Maybe Dr. Kelly. What did we do? And again, I know the timeline is much different. I know it was much shorter, but what did the city do when we renovated Harry De La Russa Stadium in Hill Park? If anyone has an idea, I'm just curious, maybe we can look into that and see if there's some sort of solution within there.
We did all away games.
Right, but I guess I was asking more in regards to busing. Did we have to contract it out? Okay.
One of the things that we'll work on as we move deeper into this process is agreements with towns that are close to us. So when Dr. Galucci is talking about having to have practice away, it doesn't necessarily need to be far away. So we would work with Chelsea and Winthrop, for example, are two that we worked with when the stadium was being done over so that we could use some of their practice fields. And that way the kids aren't traveling quite as far and the cost can be reduced because the time of the rented buses is reduced.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly.
All set, Counselor? Counselor Sereno?
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I think this is more of a question for Brian Dakin, but I can't imagine that Revere is the first high school in the state that's had to, contend with this issue of building on the same site as an existing site. I think even Saugus, the fields were located on the same site. So I know, I know this we're going to go through some growing pains through all of this, but I'm sure, Brian, could you speak to what other communities have done? Because it's not like we're reinventing the wheel. Like this has been done, and like I said, yeah, it might stink for a few years and it's not ideal, but we deal with it.
Yeah, I think it's common, especially on high school projects, that there are usually fields somewhere on the campus. And the vast majority of our high school projects are build them behind the school, swap them. It is a common way to approach it. It's not without its cost, it's not without its issues, but it's absolutely common to deal with on-site fields. In fact, one of the last high schools we completed, it's been open for a few years, Billerica High, was an example of that. They referred to their fields as the Dust Bowl, but they were fields, and they did use them, and they went from one side of the site to the other. We built basically on the fields, took the building down, reversed them. So it is common. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it all depends on what the communities have,
And Madam President, I was just going to say, and I think Councilor Novoselsky alluded to it, we have the fields at the SBA, we have the St. Mary's ball fields. I'm sure that, we're a resilient community. I'm sure we could figure out how to manage this.
Counselor Silvestri?
Thank you, Madam President, for the leeway. I just want to my counselor to the right, none of St. Mary's or the other fields are adequate for varsity sports. That's my main concern. I was a public school student who excelled in 3-sport athlete. I couldn't imagine you telling me today that my 4 years of high school were going to be played away outside of my city, never having one home game, and then you look to me as a counselor and tell me, get over it. It's growing pains. I'm sorry. Ruining a kid's high school career is not growing pains that we get over. We already taken away years due to COVID, and now we're lining them up to take away 4 more because we wanted to put a field in a different location.
Thank you, Counselor. And permission to speak from the chair, please. Permission to speak from the chair. Thank you. I'm just curious. We have a beautiful field in Beachmont. It's Fredericks Park. I just don't understand why nothing's being done there. Years ago, there was soccer. Years ago, the girls played softball there. I just don't understand why that field is just empty all the time. Thank you.
So I'm not entirely sure. What I've been told about the Beachmont field is the water.
I've never seen water down there, and I've lived there all my life.
Okay.
So,
Well,
okay.
I just know that we've had to evacuate the parking lot. We've had to evacuate the teachers' cars from the
No,
park?
the parking lot,
Oh.
yes,
Oh, okay.
but the field,
Okay.
that's what I was talking about.
True. Oh,
Thank you very
Oh.
much. Do we have any other questions? Thank you very much.
thank you, everyone.
So we're going to adjourn the city council meeting, and we're going into legislative affairs. Yes, so what do you want to do? Do you want to just take that? So Director of Park and Recreation, Michael? State your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, everybody. Michael Hinojosa, 37 Amelia Place, Revere. Before I try to answer some of Mr. Silvestri's questions, I might be able to a little better answer some of the other questions that were asked. Currently, right now, we're talking about a full-size baseball field with correct dimensions. Garfield falls a little bit short of that, even though it's a great field. Maybe a very good JV facility. If you guys have been by there, we've kept it up pretty nice. It looks good, but balls would certainly fly out of there at the varsity level. St. Mary's is not capable of handling any sort of baseball. That is strictly Little League fields, and it does house our varsity softball program, which is regulation. And to answer Fredericks Park's question, yes, it is a baseball field. In the past few years, we've probably had a couple of games down there. I think the problem with Beachmont is that the field, not the school itself, but the field is sinking. We're losing almost an inch a year from what I understand from the engineering department. So if you go back and look at that soccer field, the pitch is pretty great right now, and it is pretty hilly. So there would be certainly some work that would need to be done at that location. So I think in our 7-year park plan, Beachmont School is one of our top priorities to get up and running. So it will probably come to the forefront as we start to move forward with the high school about other places that we can start to develop. It was under my understanding also, and going back to a few meetings ago, Ambrose Field itself, I think in an original, Brian, that it was a parking lot at one point in time. So they don't think they need that. And I just found this information out probably 2 hours ago. So the potential to maybe upgrade Ambrose Field in the meantime, but that'll be up to you guys how fast do we have to push this. So short of that, I think those are the two locations now that we would look at is Ambrose and Fredericks Park. As we go forward, as we continue, the most important thing for me and for the people who are using our facilities are lights. We don't have any places that are lit up currently. So Fredericks and Ambrose are not lit. So as we look right now, sunset is less than 7 o'clock right now and losing 2 minutes a day. So by the end of September, we're talking about 6:15 from a light standpoint. Most of my programming doesn't start until 6 o'clock at night, so I would need someplace that's lit up. So impact, I think, and I'll just keep talking for a couple of seconds, but impact, currently what we have on the field right now is probably about 1,000 kids a week at RHS. About 200 kids per program, maybe a little more every night, plus weekends and plus some, adult stuff. So we can find maybe a place for 2 of them, like Ambrose. We have Ambrose lined right now. I think our problem is that we have lost a turf field. The other thing that I didn't think about, that we also have Gibson Park probably coming online at some point in time.
which is another park project that we have. Will be a full-size soccer field, the boathouse and everything. That will have lights. The only issue with that facility now will be that it's grass and not synthetic. All right. Synthetic is our key at this moment in time and being such a tight spot. The demand, and I think about the demand at Garfield School right now, I mean, not at Garfield, at Gibson, the demand at Gibson would not allow me to keep people on the field 7 days a week in a grass field setting. It would certainly look like what the old stadium looked like within 2 years. You could not keep that grass healthy without resting it, every other day. So I think that's the impact right now, is that we need to find a place with lights and get that done pretty quickly. And then I think we can, to Mr. Serino, we are resilient. We will figure it out. But I do need a place that has lights, a couple of places, especially as we're growing as a community.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Councilor Silvestri?
Thank you, Madam President. Mike, thank you for coming up here tonight. So, Mike, since I filed this motion, I've been thinking about this motion. It's been close to a month now. School just started, but before that, I drove by on my way to work in the morning, and then I made sure I drive by 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. Those fields are full from 7 in the morning to 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. Whether they're high school kids, rec departments, rented facilities, what are we doing with, okay, say the rec and the high school are good, okay? Now we got Revere Youth Soccer, basketball, all the other sporting goods and teams that we kind of help, right, in these situations. Do we have a plan? Have we sat down and looked at everything together and said, how do we deal with this? Or is it we handle what we need to handle and everyone else kind of?
Great question. So I think for us is that we're starting to meet now. Again, up until, maybe 3-4 months ago, we probably thought that the site was going to be at Wonderland. So there really wasn't a whole lot of discussion wrapped around what are we going to do if this happens. Now that this is a little bit more, pushing forward, now we have to figure it out. So that would be between me, Dr. Gallucci, Frank Shea, to figure out. I mean, recreation is my life, right? So, Revere Youth Soccer, Bolts, all the soccer organizations that we have, the adult soccer, the baseball teams, the rentals. Whether I'm running the program or not, my job is to facilitate it, right? So if you came to me and said, Mike, I need my adult softball team wants to practice because we have a tournament coming up. Well, that's my job. I mean, I might not be down there facilitating that practice, but giving you the space to do the things that you want to do is my job. So the plan is now to start planning for these things. We have 2 years to figure out how we're going to move people from this turf field, from the Rumney turf and the baseball field, to other locations that will be lit up. Lights are the key. There have been some plans in the past that have kind of come and gone with different administrations about, moving some stuff around, but now it's at the forefront. We have to figure this out quickly.
What would be the costs that we would lose on field rentals? Let's say it's a 5-year window of losing the fields that you rent. What would that look like?
Turf field rentals generate roughly $70,000 a year. That's including the stadium and the turf field. I have no way of really breaking it out, but it's about $35,000 each field, minus bills and stuff like that we have to pay, striping, paint. Just my paint costs alone are probably $3,000 a year, just to stripe.
Well, at least we won't have to stripe any fields. We'll be able to save some money there.
I'm giving you cost.
I know.
So the costs that I do have include both fields, the stadium and the turf. So probably cost us about $18,000 a year in
So let's say $350,000, $400,000 over the course of the project.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, just that one field will be about, yeah, 350,000. Well, no. Thank you. 170,000, yeah.
Yeah, but the
That
two
we
of
would
them,
lose.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the baseball field doesn't generate a whole lot of revenue,
Okay.
but, you know, it is still green space
Yep.
for us. And if you've ever been down to the baseball field, you know that we get an overflow of soccer players to be playing on the baseball field at night.
That's all I have, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other counselors? Counselor Zambudo?
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate that you're going to have some work to do to replace these fields during this project. But if I'm to worry about $350,000 when we were about to take $500 million off the tax roll to build a school at Wonderland, you're not going to get sympathy from me, okay? We're going to have
Council,
to.
I'm not looking for
we're
sympathy
gonna-
for
we're
350.
gonna
I'm looking
have
for
to
sympathy for the
provide-
education
I
and
didn't
the
interrupt
athletics of
you.
these kids.
I didn't interrupt you. We're going
I'll
to
do
have
it
to
one more
provide
time.
these fields, and I'm sure you're capable of doing it. And whatever it's going to cost, it's going to cost. We understand that. We're going to have a new high school, and that's the price we're going to have to pay. But I'm not going to worry about $350,000 versus what we were going to lose. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other counselor?
Can I just respond?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just here answering questions. Like, I'm just telling you what we generate for revenue. That's all.
With all due respect, I didn't mean that to be,
Okay.
that you were worried about the revenue.
Yeah.
I said, I sympathize that you have to do the work
Thank
to
you.
get these fields, and we appreciate that.
Thank you.
You know I have utmost respect for you. Since you started this job, I've been a fan of yours. So this had nothing to do with you. I'm just stating a fact. We're
Thank you,
worried about
Counselor.
$350,000, but nobody was worried about taking $1 billion off the tax roll.
Thank you,
I'm not
Counselor.
worried about the tax rolls, Council. I'm worried about the sports and the education of our youth. That's what I'm worried about. And apparently, you're
Counselor
not.
Silvestri, please. Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you. I'm just here to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Anybody else? This concludes this. Oh,
Thank you, guys.
come up, sir. State your name, please, and your address. You put your,
Sorry. Cesar Salazar from 87 Prospect. I'm running Riviera FC Club for 25 years. We have around 150 players all around here and serving around 400 seasonal. Sorry if I wasn't here before.
That's
I don't
fine.
understand exactly the project about money and all that, but when I hear money, it really touches me because the future of the kids have no price. It's not 300. The life of one kid, the life of one player is more than millions of dollars for me. And seeing these kids coming, especially in this kind of life we're having now, a lot of computer, very sedentary life coming out and running, and their coordination. And not only that, learn to work as a team. That's very important for our kids. I started doing here with Rivera's Youth Soccer when we have the grass fields, okay? Then came and said, listen, we're gonna take the field and we're gonna give you every inch back in turf. Well, they give us a nice field. That was good, but they took more than half of what we had at the time. I'm talking about 1997. We already were short with fields. Now we have a big board sign at the entrance of the city say, Sports City. Yes, we are a sports city, believe me. We excel in every sport. If we compare with all the cities around, the surrounding cities, they have maybe double of fields than us. 2 fields, we already short. And now you're talking about taking away another field? Come on. I mean, we need to have a sense in here in the city. We need to sit down and talk. I don't know. I don't know so much where we're going to get the money, but we need more fields for the kids. We were talking about the high school, right? Varsity, they're already in trouble. Varsity, they training 2 times a year. Soccer, I'm talking about soccer. We training all year round. Even in the winter, we use the gyms. We use 3 or 4 gyms in the city. We rent it. We pay. And I think we're doing a good job for the city because we're working with the kids from Riviera. So guys, I never stand in here to ask you for help. We never ask you for money, but we ask you not only fields, the fields that belong to the city. It's time that we need to sit down and talk. Brian, by the way, you're doing a great job building that. You don't have nothing to do with this. The only thing I think is in the wrong place. We need help. We need more fields. Thank you.
Thank you. State your name and address, please.
Yes, good evening. Wilson Correa, 12 Sweeney Ave. I volunteer as a basketball coach, now as a soccer coach. When I go to the fields and I have to tell kids, get out because we have to start practice. A bunch of kids give you that face, they don't have a place to play sports. I wonder what those kids are doing when I have to tell them we need the field. It's not about the physical activity. Sports also build you as a more having skills, people skills. They taking care of your health. Many other things follow sports. This is why I think the United States is such a great country, the best country in the sports. And we should follow into that. Taking the fields away from these kids, you cannot take away the future. Research has shown kids that practice sports excel in communities, in academics, and many other things. They stay away from trouble, you can say it. So these kids need the fields. For me, I haven't spent as much time in City Hall after I found out the high school wasn't built in Wonderland when they were getting that many fields. I'm sorry, and political is not for me, but after the high school issue, it became my kids' issue, so it became my issue, and that's why I'm here. The kids need the fields. Those kids are up there. Right now, you can see, right now if you go to that soccer field, it's about 120 kids plus. I'm being with low numbers. 120 kids in one field, when it's a field for 11 against 11. I agree with Cesar, a dollar sign, and then a kid feature, that is not a balance for me. That is an answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else that would like to speak? Okay, we're going to close this. Legislative Affairs.
Good evening. It's Monday, September 11th. Welcome to the Legislative Affairs Subcommittee. If you guys all can rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call of the members. Councilor Novoselsky. Here, Counselor Powers is absent. Counselor Silvestri?
Here.
Here, President Pro Tem McKenna? Absent, and Chairman Morbido?
Here.
Here, quorum is present.
Tonight, we have two items on the agenda. One is Motion 23146, an ordinance regulating fees of paper bags at retail establishments. We do have a ruling on this, or an opinion from the city solicitor, if it can be read.
This is from City Solicitor Paul Capizzi relative to the proposed ordinance. As communities across the country adopt some sort of plastic bag ban and encourage the use of reusable bags, many retail establishments have taken it upon themselves to go bagless by providing neither plastic nor paper bags and charging a fee when providing a customer with a paper bag. In some cases, the fee is taxable and the bag is considered an item of merchandise. For example, Boston requires that retailers charge at least 5 cents for any type of bag, and the retailer keeps the charge to offset the cost of its bags. Cambridge also requires a 10-cent fee. New York State requires a non-taxable 5-cent fee for bags and further allows stores to tack on an additional taxable fee to help offset the cost of bags. Where the fee is taxable, it follows that the bag is considered an item of merchandise, and in my opinion, the City Council cannot impose controls on what a retailer chooses to charge for an item of merchandise. Fundamentally, the store has a right to decide to be bagless to advance the use of reusable bags. A patron of the store would have the choice to purchase the item or not, or use a reusable bag to carry any purchases. For your information, a recent survey of the Sierra Club found that some 158 municipalities across Massachusetts, including Revere, have some version of a plastic bag ban. Fees are utilized to encourage the use of reusable bags and isolate the cost of paper bags among those who use them. The fee offsets the cost for the paper bags incurred by the store and simultaneously protects consumers who use their own bags from paying for those who don't.
Thank you. And we're going to have the maker of the motion, Councilor Sereno, speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to briefly say that although it's disappointing, that's why I asked for an opinion of the solicitor before we acted on it. As much as I would love to be able to pass it, if he doesn't think it would withstand, a challenge from said grocery store, then I don't think we should move forward because it could hurt the city down the line. So, thank you.
Thank you for making this motion. Your interest, well noted. I'm sure a lot of people are grateful that you put in this motion, so thank you. Any other members on the committee that would like to say a few comments? Seeing that there are none, we'll keep this in committee, or place it on file, actually. And next item on the agenda is an ordinance further amending the revised ordinances of the City of Revere relative to regulation of fireworks. Councilor Sereno.
Mr. Chairman, I think we've kind of talked about this ad nauseum the last few meetings, so I would just move that, I'm not on the committee, but I would ask the committee to move this forward and put it before the council.
Any members on the committee have any words?
I don't know if I'm in the...
Councilor McKenna.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if I'm on the committee or not, but my concern is, and I'm probably going to get booed for this, but, the fireworks over the water, the ocean. We're trying to clean our ocean, and all these fireworks and, powder and gunpowder or whatever it is going in our waters. I'm just really concerned about that. Someone just brought to my attention that they are stopping fireworks around some of the towns and cities, not around here, but, maybe Oregon or whatever, and they're having light shows with drones. So, we could think about that, but I'm really concerned about the oceans. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, through you.
Councilor Sereno.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Councilor McKenna. I don't believe we have the authority to place something like that in the ordinance because the ocean, I think, would not be under the city's jurisdiction. So, I mean, I understand beaches, which this would, I think, technically include beaches and whatnot within the community, but in terms of the ocean and professional displays, I think that would be more the state, or I don't even know if that part would even fall under the state, if the state could regulate that. Probably not. But
Has it ever been brought up?
I don't know at the state level. I don't believe it has, but again, generally, I think the ocean,
Point of information, just an example that I can think of. Do you remember a long time ago when they used to have a casino cruise ship that shipped out of Lynn? And the reason they were in gambling and was not legal in Massachusetts, the reason they were able to gamble is because it wasn't considered under the city's jurisdiction or the state's jurisdiction. So that's the closest I can think of as an example. I don't know if the city solicitor would like to speak on jurisdictional issues. No, he would not. So I think I think we all understand the purpose and the intent of the councilor's motion is to put some teeth and to have something on the books, because currently there is nothing. All of us work busy as bees all year long, and then what happens is, we forget about the fireworks, and then the warm weather comes around, and then it's impacting everyone, from dogs barking to neighbors complaining to those who served our country having PTSD. So it impacts everyone all around. So we need to get this on the books, and I think that's the main purpose of it. And we can always have amendments later on if anyone seeks to do it. So on that, we'll take a roll call if anyone else does not have any questions. Any comments? If not, we're going to vote it out for a favorable recommendation.
Shall the Legislative Affairs offer a favorable recommendation on an ordinance establishing regulations for fireworks? Councilor Novoselsky?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Powers is absent. Councilor Silvestri?
Yes.
Yes. President Pro Tem McKenna?
Yes.
Yes. And Chairman Morabito?
Yes.
Yes, this will be forwarded to the full City Council this evening with a favorable recommendation. No further business.
No further business. This adjourns this meeting. Thank you for attending.
Today is September 11th. We are here at the Revere City Council meeting. Could you please stand and salute the flag?